Hi, Jerron.
Hi.
What's your question?
I want to know what different types of mutation there are.
Different types of mutations. Okay. Yeah, let's talk about, we'll start with the smallest type of mutation first. The first most basic type of a mutation would be an alteration in the base sequence of DNA. So for example, say this is the sequence of DNA that determines that your red blood cells should be round. What can happen, since your body has 3 billion bases to keep track of, sometimes accidentally one base gets out of place. And instead of it being GC, maybe an A got inserted there by mistake. Because DNA and the sequence of the bases is the instructions on how to make a protein, now the instructions actually code for a different kind of protein. And so your red blood cells are supposed to look like this, round like a dinner plate. A person that has a single base mutation in their DNA, their cells are sickle-shaped, like a moon or a sickle. And that disease is actually called sickle cell anemia, and it's pretty bad disease. People don't usually live much past the age of 40 with this. And it's something that all that happened is one of their bases of DNA got out of order. Now that's just a single base mutation. You can have other mutations that are kind of bigger than this. Things that cause, like Down syndrome, where what happens in this case is it's a mistake that happens during meiosis. I explained earlier that during meiosis, the resulting sex cells are supposed to have 23 chromosomes each. What sometimes happens is something called non-disjunction, a pair of chromosomes that's supposed to split up and one go in each cell doesn't. They stay together. So that one sex cell gets both of a certain chromosome. Say this one has now 2 of chromosome number 21, and this one has nothing. Now if that sperm fertilizes a normal egg, you've got an entirely extra chromosome, a person with 47 chromosomes. And depending on what chromosome number that is that's extra will determine the disease or not. Now having a whole extra chromosome, that's a lot of extra DNA and usually causes many problems. So you can have an alteration in just the DNA where that changes a gene, which changes a protein, or you can have a problem called non-disjunction where the chromosomes fail to separate during meiosis, and then you get entirely wrong chromosome numbers. Did I answer your question okay?
Yes.
Good. Hi, AJ.
Hi.
What's your question?
What's the difference between the genotype and the phenotype?
Good question. Genotype, it actually has the word gene right in it. Genotype is when you describe a person's gene combination, like, are you pure dominant for a trait? For example, like with Gregor Mendel and his pea plants, pure dominant would be big T, big T. The phenotype then, for that same trait, the height of pea plants, you would say is tall. Phenotype, it begins sort of like with the word physical, phenotype. It means describing the actual physical trait that shows up. Tall, short, blue eyes, brown eyes, curly hair, straight hair. The genotype is when you describe the genes. For example, the genotype big T, little t, you use the word heterozygous to describe the genotype. Did I answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Miss Auntie.
What's your question?
I have a question about biomes. Like, can human interaction change a biome?
Yes, that's a great question. Human interactions can change a biome. Let's talk a little bit about some examples of biomes. You have land biomes like the tundra, the taiga, the desert, where we live, temperate deciduous forest. And you have marine biome, the oceans, and freshwater biomes, the lakes. For example, let's talk about freshwater biomes, lakes. In the Adirondacks, we have one of the biggest acid rain problems of anywhere on the planet, actually. And so acid rain comes from pollution, from industrial smokestacks. For example, they emit a gas called sulfur dioxide. When that mixes with water vapor in the air, it actually forms sulfuric acid, and it rains sulfuric acid filling our lakes. And so now that freshwater biome, the lake, the pH is changed. And as you know, organisms live within a very specific pH range. Like for people, we need a pH of 7, neutral. And so when you're measuring the pH of certain Adirondack lakes that are 4.2, 4.6, that's far too acidic for most fish and most plant life. And so the biome, fresh water, could literally become barren of animal life and plant life. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome. Hi, Stephanie. Good question. Let's talk about evolution. Charles Darwin is the father of evolution, just like we had mentioned earlier, Gregor Mendel being the father of genetics. So our father of evolution, Charles Darwin, he called his theory descent with modification, meaning descendants or ancestors showed modifications to their body structures as the environment changed. Now, this is the most important thing to remember about evolution. Organisms like finches, like birds, they're just randomly born with whatever shaped beak they get from their parents. It's not like they show up on an island, the seeds are not the right size for their beak and they can't eat, so they hope they can get a new beak. They can't. So with evolution, the most important thing to remember is the traits that an organism has are what they have. If the environment changes and their traits don't work anymore for that environment, organisms with that trait will die off. Organisms that coincidentally had the correct trait live, reproduce, and pass that good trait on. That's evolution. Natural selection is the basis of Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. Kind of speaks for itself. Nature selects, like I was saying. Nature selects what traits will be beneficial. Darwin thought that the process of evolution was controlled by nature. Natural selection suggests that traits that help an organism survive in a changing environment are passed on. Those are called favorable traits. Like I said, if that trait works for that organism in a changing environment, it remains in the gene pool until something else changes. So according to Charles Darwin, natural selection can influence evolution by a couple of things. One, usually in animal populations, it doesn't really work for humans, more offspring are produced by an organism than can possibly survive. This ensures, again, another step in natural selection, survival of the fittest. So of that pool of offspring that are born, only the strongest will survive. And again, those stronger, favorable traits will show up in the next generation.